Good morning. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Holy and life-giving God, on this Trinity Sunday, we thank you for who you are and for the ways in which you make yourself known to us. Be with us now as we talk and as we think and as we listen. Open ourselves up to you and to the movement of your Spirit within us. And all of this we pray in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Well, again, good morning. It's good to be with you. Before we get started, I want to just show you something that came about as a result of this. What happened this past week here at St. Peter's. It was an exciting, energetic, fun-filled week that actually several people in this room had something to do with. But this is something that was put together under the direction of Kathy Baker by the children at Bible school. And Kathy, I think, is giving them a lot of credit, but she's the one who really orchestrated this, and it's just beautiful. And I think it's going to continue. Is that right, Kathy? On the back, or is it done now? It's done. It's done. Okay. But anyway, I just wanted to show this off and to thank Kathy for what she did.
David, the cross is upside down. Does that mean distress? No, I'm sorry.
It's taken from the St. Peter's emblem that's on our paper napkins. And I understand St. Peter was crucified and did not want to be crucified as Jesus was crucified. And that's why we have the upside down cross.
I thought it was connected to the violence.
Oh, no, unrelated to that. So anyway, Kathy, thank you. Chris and Sandy Knight spent a lot of time with the children, infusing them with more sugar than I've heard about in a long time. But everything that they made and it was really was delicious, and the kids enjoyed it. So thank you, Kathy, Chris, Sandy. Thank you all so much. So today I want to just take a few minutes to continue to share some things with you about who we are as people of faith, and help us as we continue in our thought process about our church and about the church. There's two reasons that this is on my mind. One is that it's just that time of the year when people are traveling, have been traveling. I know the Claggets have just returned from a trip, and the Knights got back from a trip not too long ago. So people are moving about, not only because it's that time of year, but also just because we can again. So in thinking about what it means to travel and what it means to be a tourist, and then is to use the term that some of you may be familiar with or have been part of. I know that I heard Chris and Sandy talk about it in terms of their trip to the Holy Land, of what it means to be a pilgrim. And some of this comes from an article written by someone who some of you may remember that I have mentioned to you before, named Bill Wilson, who wrote an article on missional focus, on being focused on mission. And then with the question, and then with the subtitle of traveler, tourist, or pilgrim. So anyway, so given a little more thought to this, I just want to throw some things out for us to think about and reflect on. And then also to share with you, in connection to that, to connect with the idea of what it means to be focused on mission, are some traits, 7 traits, of what have been identified as 7 traits of a thriving church. 7 traits of a thriving church. But before we get to that, I just want to begin with this. And I assume it's been a little while since I've been to Bethlehem and to the Church of the Nativity. I don't know whether you all remember seeing this or not, but the sign at the entrance says, if you enter here as a tourist, we're hoping that if you enter here as a tourist, you would exit as a pilgrim. If you enter here as a pilgrim, you would exit as a holier one. And so as you can see, this person's comments and says that if a tourist is someone who intends to encounter or to experience things from a distance, from afar. In other words, not to engage, but just be somewhat of an observer, looking more through the lens than through the heart. A pilgrim is someone who travels with their whole self. seeking to really engage, to really move into, to really experience, and to have a deeper experience of a place. Whether it be related directly to some place that you travel, or in this case, whether it be the church and how we approach the church and our faith. So again, here are some comments that Bill Wilson makes in this article that he wrote that talks about how important, and I think he would probably argue how imperative it is to have a missional focus, to be focused on that which means going out beyond ourselves. And he talks about how asking honest and hard questions about what we're doing, about why we're doing certain things, and then being open to the possibility of doing things in a different way, of being open to change, about being open to being adaptive to the changing environment and how it is that we respond to that. And he goes on to say that if we're not willing to seek clarity around who we are and to identify our sense of mission, then again, and to segue or to talk about this concept of what it means to be a tourist or a traveler as opposed to a pilgrim, he says that we're just really then kind of traveling through life, and that we're missing an opportunity to be who God is really calling us to be as people who say that we follow Jesus. And that's when we're willing to do these things, and that when we're willing to focus on and to be guided by a sense of mission and a sense of purpose, then that is the only way that we're really going to be able to live into and to become who God has intended us to be, again, as those who say we follow in the way of Jesus. Some of you may be familiar with Rick Steves. He's a pretty well-known travel writer, especially about travel to Europe. He's written not only books, but blogs and articles, and has a PBS, or either has or has had a PBS television show, and I believe a radio show as well. So a couple of years ago, he was invited to Yale Divinity School, where he gave a talk, a seminar, that was titled Breaking Down Walls, Travel Leadership as Political and Spiritual Action. And in that talk, he identified what he refers to as being a hierarchy of people who travel. And he starts out by saying the first level is that of a tourist. And he defines a tourist as someone who just regards all travel as whatever you can get out of it, as a form of consumption. And he refers to that type of traveler as being basically the vacation goer. Okay, so you're really just kind of saying, okay, so what can I do to go and have fun, and where can that be? And it's just all about consumption. The second level is a traveler. People willing to become what he refers to as cultural chameleons, who immerse themselves in other places and ways of life. Okay, so you've got a tourist, and then you have a traveler, and then the third level he identifies as being that which is what he, as someone who writes about and focuses on and tries to get people to understand and to learn more about travel, is really trying to get people to get to, and that's what he refers to as being the most heightened experience, which is that of being a pilgrim, who is someone who seeks to find God through travel and to discover interpersonal truths along the way. Okay? So a tourist, a traveler, and then this third level is one of being a pilgrim. Now, as I mentioned, and I don't want to speak for Sandy and Chris because they can talk about their pilgrimage, but I think that's what I heard that you all refer to. And it's not uncommon for those who travel to the Holy Land, especially, for it to be referred to or labeled as being a pilgrimage. And there are other places where, especially when there is a clear connection between, whether it be through the church or whether it be through some travel organization or just a group of people who get together and are led by someone, for there to be, when there is a spiritual identity connected to it, when it's something like the Holy Land or other places like that, say the Iona in Scotland, places like that, where to refer to as going on a pilgrimage to try to get to people to understand that it's not just about being a tourist, it's not just about being a traveler, but what we're really trying to do is to see how it is that we can be shaped, informed, and maybe changed by engaging with the people and the place and the land. So does this resonate with you in some way? I mean, I think all of us have been this. I sure have. All of us have been this. There's been a few times when I've been this, but I think getting to this level is sometimes a little more challenging, because you have to be very intentional about this. And so the point here is that what Steves was trying to do as he was lecturing to this group of students at Yale Divinity School was to talk about how it is that travel can be something that can break down those walls and allow us to move into deeper and more significant relationships. All right, so when Jacqueline gets back into the room, then we'll get reconnected in some way, hopefully. So again, part of what Bill Wilson is trying to point to is that this type of thing is what is so essential, especially right now in the church, and that there are ways of being a Christian that for many of us is just kind of touristy. For many of us, it's just kind of like being a traveler. But that the most heightened experience of God and the way to draw closer to God and to really make a difference not only within ourselves but in the lives of others is when we're able to get to that point where we see ourselves as being on a pilgrimage and being pilgrims. Oh, did somebody go looking for it? Okay. All right, so let's just stop for a moment. Anything so far that resonates with you here? Yes, ma'am.
Mission trip.
You got to take this and talk into it. Hold it close.
A mission trip made me think of that third one.
Uh-huh.
When we went to San Diego, it was so different than what most people think of when you go to San Diego. And it was very meaningful to Jerry and myself.
Mm-hmm. Great. Very good. Chris or Sandy, do y'all want to say anything about your experience of what it was like to be pilgrims as opposed to just tourists or travelers? There you go.
Well, part of it was every time we went to sleep. Of course, seeing all the sights that were significant in Jesus' life. But part of it was almost every place we went, we had a small service. Either just we read the part of the gospel that explained that part of Jesus' mission, or we had some Eucharist when we could.
All I got to do is touch it with my finger. Is that right?
Over the Sea of Galilee, that was just amazing to be in that spot and to have a Eucharist. And so I think the whole time we were there, you were focused on God. Mm-hmm. Every step of the way, everything we saw was related.
Mm-hmm. Which really connects with what Steve's is talking about here about finding God through travel, doesn't it? And discovering that some interpersonal truths maybe along the way. I found several years ago when I took a group to the Holy Land for a trip that when I initially began to talk about it being a pilgrimage, that I got a lot of blank stares. You know, well, what does that mean, and how is that any different than we're just going on a trip to the Holy Land? But when we really began to try to talk more about and live into what it meant to look at that as being a pilgrimage, then we experienced exactly, Sandy, some of what you're describing. Okay, so as I mentioned, then there are some traits that have been identified as being consistent with what are known as churches that are thriving, churches that have been able to be resilient enough to move into and then move beyond not only the last couple of years that have been extremely difficult, but also to have weathered the various things that have impacted churches over the last 15 to 20 years. And one of the things that Bill goes on to talk about is how thriving churches are recognizing that just running back to and trying to reclaim and restart things that were going on pre-COVID is wasted opportunity to gain some essential clarity about purpose. Does that make some sense? Now, that certainly has happened here. That's happened in almost every church that I know. Everybody has wanted to say, well, now we're back. Now the church has reopened again. Now we are able to do this, and those things that we were not able to do. And so how do we just bring everything back that we were doing before? And so the point here is that doing that means then that you lose the opportunity to be reflective on and to be intentional about saying, well, what do things look like now in an environment that has been so radically changed by a pandemic, and then how might that help us to gain a greater sense of mission and purpose. And so instead of, he says, operating like a tourist or a traveler who just kind of, skims the surface, who just kind of consumes, or who just kind of, looks at this journey of faith as being something that is just right up here, then what if we looked at this next chapter as an opportunity to take a pilgrimage? There we go. It's on a pilgrimage, that's right. So again, instead of looking at life as just being, something that we're just kind of going through, that we take it a little bit deeper. Could we take a more mindful approach to who we are, why we are here, how we got there, and where we are going? A little bit of a take on that whole thing of the who, what, when, and where. Who, what, when, where, why. And it will be, as he says, it will involve us being much more thoughtful and deliberate about everything. Everything. And that's not easy. It's hard. Because what we want is to go back to those things that are familiar. We want to go back to those things that provide comfort and that provided meaning. And it's more difficult to take this approach of looking at the who, the why, the how, and the where. Okay? So, here are 7 traits of thriving churches. And this was a study that was done, or actually is being done, with several churches of different stripes and flavors in Nashville, Tennessee. And it is a particular project that was funded by the Lilly Foundation to help these churches over a period of time, I believe it's 5 years, to be able to with coaching and mentorship, to be able to then see if they can live into these seven traits. And the project is called Project Thrive. So the first one is that thriving congregations have an energy and an enthusiasm born out of a hopeful mentality. Okay? So number one is hope. Now that's, if you if you have listened to or you're going to listen to my sermon this morning, you'll hear me say that, St. Paul identifies three things: faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. But being hopeful and being able to be positive about the future and moving into it is the number one, is listed as the number one trait of a thriving church. Number two, thriving congregations have innovative approaches to ministry born out of a joyful willingness to take risks. So if you're willing to take risks, what comes with that? Failure. Yeah. We don't like to do that in the church. We often shy away from embarking on or initiating things that might not work, because no one inherently likes to fail. But you may have heard me say before that one of the things that Bill also talks a lot about is developing a startup mentality, and in looking at our approach to the church as being something that means that there will be failure, and that there will be things that will be put into place, things that we'll try, things that we may need to try that may not work. But that being able to be, just joyfully saying, this is what we're going to try, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't, we're okay with that, and then we'll find the next thing. Number three, thriving congregations have a collaborative approach to ministry born out of humility and the desire for partnership. Collaboration. We have some experience of that with the tabernacle, and with conversations that took place between a group of people here and a group that are involved in a church called the Tabernacle in North St. Louis. We have a little bit of experience with that, and also providing a bridge loan to an entity that was formed out of that particular church. We have been collaborative in the past and continue to be collaborative with other institutions like Haven of Grace. Excuse me, I drew a blank for a second. Haven of Grace, the Episcopal City Mission. But there is a continued need for us to think about how it is that we partner with others in the community, to be collaborative. How do we work together? And not just with nonprofits or others, but how do we work with other churches? How is it that we're seen as being willing to collaborate, not only with other Episcopal churches, but with other churches and even with other faith traditions? Number four, thriving congregations demonstrate faithful engagement with the world born out of an expanded understanding of Christian practices and sacraments. Faithful engagement with the world born out of expanded understanding of Christian practices and sacraments. Now, I would argue that for us, this is a little bit easier to do because we are a very sacramental church. Some traditions don't talk about or hold up how it is that we're fed by the Holy Eucharist, how it is that we recognize and claim who we are as people who are baptized through reciting the baptismal creed and participating in the sacraments of the church. But it's that connection between what we do and say and how we receive the sacraments, and then taking that out into the world that has been shown to be an important part of what it means to be a thriving church. In other words, not just saying that this is what we come to do, but that we carry out who we are as people who are fed and nourished by Christ, as those who have been baptized, as those who are willing to confess their sins, etc., etc. We carry that out into the world and into our lives. Number five, thriving congregations demonstrate a capacity for substantial ministry outcomes born out of visionary leadership. A capacity for substantial ministry outcomes born out of visionary leadership. Now, some of you have heard me say, and I'll continue to say it, that within the next year, we'll begin a process here of thinking about thinking of strategic visioning, to think about how it is that we move forward in an intentional way. Without a vision, the people perish, the Bible tells us. And so I think that this one is the one that I think just is kind of almost goes without saying, that there has to be vision, and there has to be implementation of the vision. There has to be some sense of leadership, obviously by someone like me, other clergy, vestry. All of us have a role to play in vision and in leadership. Number 6, thriving congregations display a missional focus born out of an abiding awareness of their particular identity. Back to the who are we, why do we exist, the who, what, when, where, why. Being able to say, what is our identity? Who are we? If we are not here anymore, would it make any difference? Okay? Having that then connects and when you can say this is who we are and this is what we want to do and this is our mission, then you have established your identity and you begin to live into that. And then the 7th one is that thriving congregations display a fervent desire to make a difference in the world, born out of a growing awareness of the needs of their ministry context. So, again, what difference does it make that St. Peter's is situated where it is, and what is our context? What do we know about the surrounding communities? Not just Ladue, but the surrounding communities. How do we fit into that? Do we really know what the needs and concerns and the hopes are of those around us, and how is it that we can fit into that and make a difference? A growing awareness of the needs of their ministry context. Do we really have an understanding of what? I mean, we have some sense of what it means and we've made an impact in one church. That in North St. Louis that I mentioned that established a community development corporation to create this wonderful entity in this, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 block area. Does that sound about right, Charlie? There, but we know that that's just one place. So what is it that we know about the rest of the area and how it is that we might fit into and make a difference? Okay, I want to stop there. What strikes you here? What resonates with you, if anything? What questions might you have? You look like you were about to say something.
I was going to say overwhelming.
What's that?
Exactly what I was going to say.
Overwhelming.
Overwhelming. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is. No, it is a lot. You're right. It is a lot.
Is it hierarchical? In other words, you really have to focus on one before you start going after a whole list of things? Or how do you use these guidelines to become a thriving congregation?
Yeah. You may have heard me mention a moment ago that the churches that are involved in and are working to be mentored and to develop these and to see if they can develop these, it's a 5-year process. So this is a lot. But what I want to suggest is that just keeping these in front of us and continuing to come back to them and to look at how it is that we can be more mindful of this is huge. Because I think that probably for many of us, maybe for most of us, this is new stuff. You know? I mean, many of our churches in the Episcopal Church, I mean, let's be honest, we haven't planted successfully a whole lot of churches in the last 25 years or so. I've known of a few that have been planted, that have been successful, but most of the church plants, the new churches that I know of, just didn't make it. You know, we have not been very good at that. So, you know, we operate out of this mentality of we've been doing things in churches that have been around for a long time, like St. Peter's has. And so to start looking at these types of things is different. It's a new way of thinking about and being the church, but also is a new way of thinking about and being a person who's connected to the church. Back to the traveler, tourist, pilgrim thing. I'll come back.
Are there thriving churches in our area that we could look at as examples of this?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know that they have necessarily identified. I don't know that they have necessarily identified churches in particular areas that are thriving. I mean, I would offer and suggest that St. Peter's in some ways is a thriving congregation. You know, I mean, we are healthy in many ways. We have a lot of things that we can offer. We have a lot to be thankful for. We have been and are still involved in some significant and substantial ministry, and given, you know, the nature of a lot of other churches, not only in the Episcopal Church but in other denominations, we're very healthy and thriving. I think that what this points to is the future and the long term. To continue to be a thriving church and to continue and quite frankly, in some cases, to make it will involve some of these things. Now, are there congregations here that might fit, that might be there with some of these 7 things? I don't know. That's a great question, Charlie. I hadn't thought about that, but I'm happy to look into that a little bit more. So, don't know.
David, if you took out the word congregation, I mean, after all, congregation is an assembly of people with some shared values, right?
Yep.
Don't, in many ways, each of us need to move through this kind of growth. If the congregation itself is to grow.
Yes, right. Yes, and that goes back to the tourist, traveler, pilgrim. That to really get to this point then means being willing to recognize that this journey of faith involves being willing to be a pilgrim and taking it on as a pilgrimage and not just as a tourist or a traveler. Does that make sense?
Spectator.
Yeah, spectator. That's right. Because it's easy, you know, it's easy in our tradition to just show up, you know, and to be, you know, talked to, preached to, given communion to, and then walk out the door, you know?
I'd like to focus on the word hopeful, because I think that affects every one of those 7 things. And if you think about it, where there is crime and a lot of murders, there's no hope for these people. And if there's any little way that we can convey hope and share that, like we have in North St. Louis. And there's other congregations who need the support in that hopefulness. And sometimes it comes through financial donations. It can come from lots of different things. But that hopefulness to me is so important. And then there was another word in there. I can't remember it right now, but it hopeful to me just really stands out.
Okay.
Because that's what's so lacking in the sad places.
If we want to keep this in front of us, so we're all focused on it, is there a way that we can make it more succinct? Like the first one would be hopeful mentality, the second one would be willingness to take risks, and the third one would be humility, collaborative approach.
Collaboration, yeah.
That kind of thing. I can think, I mean, I just can't keep that many words in front of me.
Yeah, that's a great point, Susie. Yes, and this was their language, and you know, as I'm presenting it, wanted to make sure that I stayed consistent with that. But no, you're exactly right, and I think to pull out some of those things about being hopeful, being joyful, being willing to be collaborative, being willing to engage with the world. Those are the things that really is where the rubber meets the road. And to be willing to take risk and to accept failure. I would offer that being willing to take risk is probably one of the most important things. And being willing to get out there with some things again that may be a little bit challenging, but being willing to do that I think is so very. But yes, you're right. Being focused on mission. We easily can cut those down. But also part of what we will do will be to have some listening sessions that actually Bill will help to facilitate, in which we pull out from all of us. What is it that we want? What is it that is the direction that we want to go? And then put that into thinking about how we make sure that we're working to be a thriving congregation. Yes, ma'am. Hold on. Let me make sure you get the microphone.
Normally I can talk about that. There are some wonderful synagogues that are out near here that have thriving missions and are very welcoming. I actually go to Friday night services at Sheramet a lot, and they are really fabulous. And then there's also a collaboration that some of the synagogues have with the Muslim community. And I think that would be something that we would also want to look into, is collaboration with other faiths and other congregations.
Great, thank you. All right, so as we kind of wrap this up, I just wanted to offer this as a way of saying that hopefully that we can live into and move more deeply into what it means to be a pilgrim, and really be thinking about where it is that we're going as we work to becoming mission focused and looking at on a regular basis who we are and what we're doing, and making that connect with our sense of purpose and meaning. All right, as always, thank you all for your engagement and your involvement in this. God bless you.